What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Pick Six Podcast, CBS Sports Daily NFL Podcast. I'm Will Brinson. I'm your host, and I forgot to do the cold YouTube open. That's okay. It is Thursday, April 28th. It's draft day. Hello, YouTube. How are you? If you're there, like, subscribe, and comment. It's so bad at my job. It's draft day. It is the freaking draft is here. Arguably the craziest draft in NFL history with just absolute insanity all over the place. And joining me to break it down with the caveat that it's 1:00 on Thursday afternoon. You'll get this podcast in your audio feed, hopefully by like 2:30. Nada is a super diligent at his job and gets stuff cranked around. It might even be earlier than that. But joining me to break it down, John Breach, Josh Edwards, Chris Chapasso. What is up, boys? We got some burning questions to get to in what is just setting up to be an insane draft.
Brinson, we're going to have to draft a new host. That is what we're going to have to draft with this nonsense starting. I can't believe it is the NFL draft. And you know what? I haven't been on the podcast in so long with these guys, I barely recognize them. What were their names again? Is that Ryan Wilson down there and Baker Mayfield? How do we get him on the podcast?
I'm about to be traded.
If you have a question about the draft and you're in the chat on YouTube, make sure and drop it in there. We'll be happy to answer those as well. Look, let's get right to it because we're going to try and keep this a quicker episode because the turnaround time, especially the closer you get to the draft, you know, it like stuff becomes completely worthless once you get news. Although I don't know that in this particular draft, we will know for sure. Like, for instance, last year we knew 1 and 2. Like weeks in advance. And it was just a matter of, are you on team Mac or are you team Trey as to who they would take 3. Although I think I actually mocked Justin Fields, which in hindsight, very stupid. And we knew that even after that, like the 49ers pick they were going to stay there. It was going to be a quarterback. And then after that, it was going to be like some combination of Kyle Pitts, Jamar Chase, Penei Sewell, etc. Like it was pretty set in stone. And the markets had moved such that the over-unders were just like, you know, Kyle Pitts over-under under 5.5 is like just wildly juiced, right? So now we have a situation where we think Trayvon Walker is going to be the first overall pick. So I guess my first burning question would be, Breach, I ask you, or Josh, or Traps, I don't know. Josh, I'll ask you first. We're going to go diagonal. Like Gilbert Gottfried in Hollywood Squares, baby. You ever see that clip? You guys might be too young for that clip, but do you see that clip after he passed?
Yeah.
It's so good. He gives these deked out answers, and when they guess wrong, he's like, "You idiot!" and just does it like they get like 8 wrong in a row. It's incredible TV from like the mid-90s. I loved Hollywood Squares. Anywho, Josh, burning question number 1. Do you think that Shad Khan will step in and overrule Trent Baalke for Trayvon Walker at first overall, or do we end up getting the chalk there that we've been hearing for the last few weeks with the Georgia edge rusher going first?
I think we are going to get the Georgia edge rusher number 1 overall just because they have empowered Trent Baalke all offseason. You know, he won the power struggle. He's still there. I think they're going to continue allow him to do his job, and that's why we see Trayvon Walker is the first pick in tonight's draft.
You know, and to add on that, which is just blows my mind and is really crazy and is basically typical Jacksonville, is that you have these reports that Shad Khan is high on Aiden Hutchinson, that you have Doug Peterson for an offensive lineman because he wants to protect his quarterback, and you have Baalke who wants obviously Trayvon Walker. And like Josh says, if Khan refused to get rid of Baalke during the offseason, during January and February, you had all these coaching candidates saying, yeah, I'll take your job if you get rid of the general manager. And Khan picks the general manager, decides to stick with him. And so this would be the ultimate backstabbing move if Khan overruled him and vetoed him at the last second and said, yeah, we're going with Peterson's guy. We're going with my guy. We're not going with your guy. So I would love to see them not go with Trayvon Walker just to see all the drama and chaos that would ensue. But I do agree with Josh, and I think Trayvon feels like the guy here.
It's really bad that we kind of
That's
saw this coming.
sorry.
We didn't even need reports to know there was going to be disagreement inside the Jaguars organization. Like, it was obvious that somebody was going to, prefer one player, another person was going to prefer another, and there was going to be this combative nature in the war room. It's just crazy how you had the opportunity to build an organization that is able to work together, and it doesn't seem like that was done this year.
Yeah, it does feel like that's going to be the pick for the Jaguars, but I'll take it in that we are like 5 hours away from the draft or 6 hours away from the draft, and we're not quite sure after the last 5 or 6 drafts when the number 1 pick at least has been locked in. So leave it up to the Jaguars to have infighting on the day of the draft for their front office. But as someone that loved the old school drafts where there weren't picks getting tipped and insiders reporting days before who the first selections were going to be, I love that stuff. So the fact that we're here on draft day and still not quite sure who's going to be the first overall pick, I'll take it.
So Trapasso loved life before the internet.
Yes,
that's what it sounds like.
You mean when people didn't even care about the second round? It's like,
yeah, I do not
okay,
even today. Like today, tonight, I will not be on Twitter getting ahead 3 picks. I literally am a traditionalist, and I will watch Roger Goodell make the picks. I don't know if that's weird. That's just how I am. I don't like to have JLC or whoever it may be tipping those picks. So yeah, I use the internet a lot. I think it's a great tool, but not for the NFL draft.
It depends on which pick it is. Like, for instance, the first pick, I'm flipping my phone over, closing the laptop, and I'm sweating out Goodell strolling out of that thing. And if he says if for some reason he slipped up and started with aid, I'd be like, no, and flip out. But what are you going to do? I tend to agree. I think it's going to be Walker. There has been, just to the larger point about the number 1 overall pick, and I feel like I've said this and tweeted this a lot. Maybe not enough. But if your owner, and reading Albert, this is what scared me about saying that I thought Trayvon Walker would be one for the last few weeks, is that Albert Breer did an interview with Shad Khan, and basically was the interview was essentially him saying he's like, I really need to get my hands and be a little more hands on with this draft. It's like, no,
yikes.
It's like you need to hire, right? And then he comes in the day before the draft and is like, all right, what are we doing? And it's like, well, whoa. What do you mean you've decided? What? That's crazy. I'm here to decide. And I love the Hutchinson. What do you mean you're going to Walker? And it's like, you can't. And so then there's reports that even today, up and through lunch, and maybe still right now, for all we know, and it's possible the NFL is encouraging them to do this for drama purposes, but they're having debates about whether they should go Ike Ekwonu or Trayvon Walker at 1. Not only is that that's not even a fundamental debate about who's your favorite edge rusher, and that's what we're going with. It's we don't know what position we want, and that becomes problematic because then you're spending all this time debating about who should go 1, and you're not even that's time you should really be spending about things all right, who might fall to us at 33, and what are we going to do? There should not be a day of debate about prospects at different positions if you have a debate at all. You have to be in line. It's crazy to me that 3 factions a day before the draft in Jacksonville were arguing as to what 3 different players. And you have, one is the GM who might quit if you draft Aiden Hutchinson. 2 is the coach who, won a Super Bowl and wants this offensive lineman. And 3 is the owner who has full Trump power to just say, nope, we're taking Hutchinson. You can't do anything about it. Imagine trumping both your GM and your head coach with a single pick after you retained one and then hired the guy. I mean, that would be crazy. So it seems like they're going to be a little more reasonable here and go Walker. And I'm okay with Walker.
But can you imagine how Doug Peterson feels right now? He is probably sitting in the war room thinking, what kind of clown show did I sign up for? It's the Arrested Development. It's like, oh, I've made a huge tiny mistake meme. That's how he feels right now. He's like, what? Why did I think this was the spot to go? He's probably telling Bucky, look, man, have you seen my resume? I have a literal Super Bowl win in the past 5 years. All you have is you ran the 49ers in the ground. You kind of ran this franchise in the ground. You fire every head coach you deal with. you had a couple home runs in the draft, which gives you a little bit of credibility there. But I can't imagine that anybody in this, whether it's Kahn, Peterson, or Trent Baalke, if any of these guys are going to be happy at the end of the day. It's just going to be an awkward situation.
All right, burning question number 2. And I realize that this is so, and you guys feel free to throw your burning questions out too, but I want to get through the first 3 picks with these because I think that this draft is so unique in the sense that if like it's been floated. So, all right. Here's burning question number 2. Traps. Have the Lions been game planning as if they would have access to Aiden Hutchinson all along? AKA, does Aiden Hutchinson change their game plan? And do they, if he's available, sprint to the podium as everyone has suggested?
I think they will pick him, but they probably had to plan for Aiden Hutchinson not being there up until like 3 or 4 days ago, like over the weekend, when this Travon Walker train is kind of left the station. For the longest time, it was Aiden Hutchinson at 1, Aiden Hutchinson at 1. That was going into the combine. That was even leaving the combine after Walker had the really good workout, and Hutchinson's was pretty good too. So I think the Penei Sewell connection to Kayvon Thibodeau should not be overlooked. That there are some reports out there that, yes, they would run the Aiden Hutchinson pick to the podium, but I think Thibodeau is pretty close to Aiden Hutchinson. And again, if there's any character concerns, off-field concerns, to have someone that was Kayvon Thibodeau's teammate, knows him intimately in Penei Sewell, I think that will be on their minds if they're sitting there at 2 with Hutchinson and Thibodeau on the board.
Yeah, I think they just turn the card in. They already have it written down, and underneath in parentheses it says, if Jacksonville takes Travon Walker, don't even call us. This is our pick.
I agree. I think it's going to be Aiden Hutchinson. If you're close between those 2 players, you're probably going to be more in the camp of Aiden Hutchinson at number 2 overall, just because, not because he's from down the street in Ann Arbor, but because he's probably more of a culture fit for what they're trying to do in that organization.
This is a good one. Good catch by Brandon Pruitt. Peter Schrager is appearing on the Pat McAfee show and just dropped that. See, and this is where I just dropped that a team in the top 10 has told him that they think Thibodeau is going to the Lions. I agree. I think
that's your bold prediction, Brinson.
Yeah, I think that I'm not trying to disparage Aiden Hutchinson, but like, man, there's a bad tape out there of Aiden Hutchinson where you're like,
The
Georgia game he just got completely stonewalled, and that's Georgia. I get that they're good. He does have those arms. Like, there are a lot of NFL franchises that have thresholds. These front offices have thresholds for certain physical traits. And you're talking about a franchise that is run by Rod Wood, who is leaning on Chris Spielman, who is an old school defensive lineman who probably doesn't like tiny T-Rex arms. And they're not really that small. They're like 32 and a half, but still. And, Dan Campbell, who everybody's like, I don't buy the Aiden Hutchinson's a Dan Campbell guy. Loves to nibble on ankles if he can catch him with those tiny arms. I think that Thibodeau had an interview with our Josina Anderson on CBS Sports HQ where he said that he and Brad Holmes got along marvelously. Like he was like being at my uncle's cookout. Like we were laughing and chuckling and giggling, he even said. And for me, the Penei Sewell thing cannot be ignored. They drafted Penei Sewell with a first-round pick last year. He played really well. That is a guy they trust. Penei Sewell is not going to lie to him and be like, "Yeah, you should draft Tibbs too," if he didn't legitimately think Tibbs would be a great teammate and a great pass rusher for the Lions. And I think that if you're Detroit, the idea of playing it safe and grabbing the local guy is fine, except like, what has ever worked for the Lions? Like the Seinfeld, the opposite episode.
Yeah.
Like, tuna on toast hasn't worked. Let's try some chicken salad on rye. So I think they go Tibbs at 2, and then the storyline that starts it'll be what's happening on NFL Network and ESPN is like, whoa, Aiden Hutchinson fell to 3. This is a shot. And look, he could go 2. It wouldn't be that crazy. But let's say he's available at 3. Our next burning question. Breach. You're muted. So what were you saying?
I was going to say then this turns into draft day and Aiden Hutchinson becomes Bo Callahan. Everybody's wondering why he's dropping down.
Yes.
And especially if the hometown team passes on him. I mean, that's a gigantic red flag. And if that happens, that opens the door. Maybe he drops out of the top 5.
Yeah. And which would be crazy. So my next burning question, Breach, no one knows what the Texans are trying to do. There's rumblings about what they want to do. I've been told that they like Neal, that they like Stingley, and they like Ike Ekwonu. I don't know how they feel about Hutchinson. I don't think that they've, at least until like the last 48 to 72 hours, have been game planning for the idea that Hutchinson might be there at 3. I would be surprised if Nick Caserio wanted to draft Hutchinson. I don't know what they're going to do at 3. It's the current biggest buzz out there, Breach. Let me ask you this. Who, if you had to pinpoint one person that the Texans would take at 3, or you could even be one position, what would it be? And do you buy the buzz that they're going to trade back into the top 10 from 13 in order to grab another player? Presumably it's OL and cornerback, or potentially D end OL. I guess you go D end cornerback, one of those 3 combinations.
Yeah, I have no idea why, but I was thinking about the Texans draft pick before I went to bed last night. Like, of all the teams, and I do think Aiden Hutchinson dropping to 3 absolutely would throw a wrench into things. So let's just say he's not there for right the second. He goes 2. I think the Texans will go offensive line. That's what it feels like right now. And the reason I think that is because I think the first round of the draft is deeper at corner than the offensive line. So you have your top 2 or 3 guys on the offensive line, whether it's Evan Neal, Ekwonu, or Charles Cross, and then you kind of have a huge gap before you get to the next tier. But then you have the corners, and I feel like if you wait to take a corner with that 13th pick, or if you trade up to 9th or 10th or 8th, there is going to be a very solid first-round corner waiting there for you. But that option's not going to be there if you wait to take the offensive lineman. So I think they take the offensive lineman first. Now, whether that's Evan Neal or Ekwonu, I don't know. Feel like Brinson, there might be some substance to what you were saying that Nick Caserio is high on Evan Neal. So I'm going to just go position-wise and say they take an offensive lineman 3rd overall.
Evan Neal, by the way, currently 10-1 to go 3rd overall.
Ooh. Sprinkle? Is that what you sprinkle?
I just sort of, Josh, I wonder if, probably worth the sprinkle. I sort of wonder if it wouldn't make more sense to, let's say you love Derek Stingley and you love the 2 offensive linemen, Ike and Evan Neal. And maybe you love Sauce Gardner too. That's sort of the question there. But like, if you love Stingley and think he's going to be an elite prospect, and you also love 2 offensive linemen, anybody who wants to trade up in this draft will be able to trade up. You can definitely get to 6 for some kind of cost, and it probably won't be that much. You can probably get to 7. I don't think the Giants will trade out of 5.
You think you're getting a 6? You think the Panthers would just?
Yes, the Panthers will trade down for.
I mean, they have the huge 131 pick gap between their next one, but I think they're the one team that is not just going to give their pick away.
Oh, no. I think if you give them a second, you're like, we'll give you a 2nd and 13 for 6, and maybe like a 4th. They're making that move in a heartbeat. It's 7 spots, but at 13, you're like, worst case scenario, you can just take Trevor Penning. Like, maybe Charles Cross falls to you. You don't want to pass on the OL, but Josh, my question would be, actually, I don't know what my question was. What do you think? How do you think this Texans scenario plays out, I guess?
Yeah, so this morning I filed my final mock draft, and I had them taking Ike Ekwonu. The part that I struggle with is I don't know if that's an inner bias or that's what they would actually do, because it is my belief that you need to have a quality offensive line, especially when you're trying to evaluate a young quarterback like Davis Mills. I think that's the direction they should go. Now, which direction will they go? I think that's entirely different, because you've got a defensive-minded head coach, which often plays into the conversation. So maybe they do go on the defensive side of the ball. If you've got edge rushers going at 1-2 and you wanted to get one of these edge rushers, then you almost have to take one at number 3 overall. Now, as far as trading back up, this is a team that knows what they have to work with over the next couple of years. They've already made the Deshaun Watson trade. They know what they have in terms of draft capital next year and the following year. So they can afford to be a little bit more aggressive if they hone in on a couple of players that they feel fit their organization and are going to help expedite that rebuild a little bit more.
Traps.
Oh, sorry.
If two people, just as we're going around these, if two people have talked,
sure. Sure.
To the general crowd, dive right in.
Yeah, see, I think what Breach outlined,
I'm reading like different rumors. Like I'm like all of a sudden I'm reading a rumor about the Chargers are going to move up to 11 to get Jordan Davis. It's insane.
Oh, yikes. Okay, so I think what Breach said makes sense about when you're looking at the positional depth at corner compared to other positions, and feels like offensive tackle is the big three, and then kind of on the outskirts of that, Trevor Penning and not much else. I feel like looking at Nick Caserio and his time in New England with Stephon Gilmore way back in the day, Ty Law, Malcolm Butler in that Super Bowl, that they always prioritized at least having one like outstanding man-to-man cornerback. So I think whether it's Stingley or Sauce Gardner, I'm not sure. I could see them going in that direction at 3. And then with 5, 6, and 7, we know the Giants probably want an offensive tackle, but they have been pretty open about being willing to trade back. That's the area that the Texans from 13 are targeting to then say, hey, we like all 3 tackles. Whoever's available at 5, 6, or 7 will trade up to get Ike Ekwonu or Evan Neal. I just feel like with Lovie Smith, defensive-minded coach, Nick Caserio's time in New England, they had Darrelle Revis when they won a Super Bowl. I think he will not want one of the 2 elite corner prospects, in my opinion, Derek Stingley and Sauce Gardner, to not be there later inside the top 10, and he would trade up later for an offensive tackle.
The one thing I would say to that real quick, though, with Caserio, and obviously you mentioned Stephon Gilmore and Darrelle Revis and these guys, but those guys were not drafted by the Patriots. In New England, historically, when Caserio was there, didn't use first-round picks on corners. They definitely took a few safeties, Patrick Chung, Devin McCourty, bunch of safeties there. But Caserio, when he was there, they never really drafted corners.
Agree completely. A point I have made repeatedly throughout this process, but just to play devil's avocado here. The Patriots never had the number 3 overall pick in like one of the most, I hate to keep calling it the worst drafts, but it's like one of the most lacking in truly elite talent drafts we've seen. And I think that if you went back to,
I can't wait till the listener throws this podcast back in your face in 20 years when like 41 of the players from this draft make the Hall of Fame.
That's right. Hey, look, man, weirder things could happen for sure. I sort of wonder if you went back to the 2012 NFL draft, and obviously there's a crazy disparity of, dudes who were taken, like Andrew Luck was going to be a Hall of Famer, then retires. RG3 won Rookie of the Year, and then is out of the league in 3 years. Matt Khalil was good, then terrible. Ryan Tannehill was terrible, then good. Luke Kuechly was great, but didn't have a long career. Stephon Gilmore at 10. Like, if the Patriots had been picking at 10 and not at 21, and maybe they traded up to get Chandler Jones, or they got it. They traded up to get Chandler Jones.
They did. I think. Yeah.
Like, don't you think that given how Bill Belichick acted in free agency with Stephon Gilmore, like, don't you think he might have considered taking Stephon Gilmore with a top 10 pick? I just wonder how many truly elite corners he's actually ever had an opportunity to draft. Because if you're an elite corner, you usually go, like, if you're a elite corner, you're usually going in the top 5 or 10, and Belichick's just never been picking there. So,
but the flip side of that, to play devil's avocado, is that you don't know that you're drafting an elite corner. That like how many shutdown corners? It's just, you have no idea. The draft is a crapshoot, and so it actually makes more sense to wait and see that they've developed into a shutdown corner, and then go out and give them in free agency, because that's a position, especially if you're the Patriots, that makes Belichick's defense work when he has a shutdown corner like that. And so, maybe that's a reason they don't draft corners, because Belichick wants to make sure they pan out in the NFL before he goes out and signs them, which has been his MO for the past 10 years.
Yeah. Okay. So I think there's a good chance that the Texans and the Panthers work something out. If the Panthers are trading.
Is that inside scoop? Is that an inside scoop from your source?
I was just sort of reading the tea leaves. All right, let me ask you this. There's a burning question. Do the Panthers trade out of 6? Traps.
I think they will. I think they're going to find somebody, whether it's the Texans. There's rumors that the Jets would want to move up from 10.
There's rumors about the Chiefs coming up. Like if the
Yeah,
Chiefs
there's-
two first and 29-30 and their second round pick, aren't the Panthers doing that?
They would have to. That would almost be malpractice if they didn't. If they said, nope, we're going to pick, whether they like Charles Cross or Icky, to just pick an offensive tackle there and then go into the season with Sam Darnold, or maybe trading for another 2018 draft class quarterback in Baker Mayfield, turning down that offer. I don't think at this point we'll see probably at least one, maybe two offensive tackles go in the first 5 selections, which will make it easier for the Panthers to say, hey, our offensive tackle wasn't there. We're trading back. There's always a mystery team, probably not the Saints, but crazier things have happened. And we just mentioned 4 or 5 candidates that will probably want to get into the top 10. And I tend to agree with Will that you're not going to have to, get as much or trade away as much to move inside the top 10. And I think the Panthers, with that, like Breach mentioned, 131 pick gap from their first rounder to their fourth rounder, they need day 2 selections because the roster still really needs to get built out.
Well, it's also like, all right, so you mentioned 2 offensive linemen gone in the first 5. Do we have a cornerback gone in the first 5 in that scenario? Are the first 5 2 edge rushers, a cornerback, and 2 offensive linemen? Because then that leaves either.
I think it's a third edge.
Oh, third edge. That would be that's the odds-on favorite.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So, like, when you get to 6, one of 2 things is, we think one corner at least is gone. There's a chance 2 corners are gone, but let's say for the sake of the argument, 1 corner, and then one combination of 3 edges, 1 offensive lineman, or 2 edge, 2 offensive linemen. That means it's some combination of Evan Neal, Ike Ekwonu, Charles Cross, Jermaine Johnson, and Aiden Hutchinson, Kayvon Thibodeau. Like, again, not
will be
all
there.
Of those guys, but some combination of those guys is sitting there at 6. Not to mention all the wide receivers. Like, the Panthers are trading out of 6 unless they just have some insanely high grade on Evan Neal or Ike Ekwonu. And I think that Scott Fitterer, who is a pen went flying, is a good is very good at executing trades.
Like, he likes trading down, right?
He loves to trade down. I think you can drum up a lot of interest in 6 with the combination of players that are there. And in a perfect world, it's like, oh, it's Sauce Gardner could be there. I mean, you can get something pretty good by moving out of 6, and it's just a matter of, like, can you get a future first? Can you get the Chiefs package that we talked about? Can you get like, would the Texans give up one of their first next year for plus 13 for 6? Would they give you a second for it and something? Like, I think you can get enough where, and it all depends on how far down you're willing to move, and then maybe move down again. Hell, I don't know. I think they're moving out of 6. Anybody just wholly disagree? They'll stay there and take the tackle if someone they love is there.
Breach, you're muted again.
You're muted again, Breach.
I keep muting because my kid is upstairs. It sounds like there is an elephant circus going on.
It is.
And I mean, there could be. I could go up there and literally, I would not be surprised if my daughter had a new pet elephant. But yeah, I think they stick. I think they stay. I think that the Panthers, their biggest need there, obviously we don't know the quarterback situation. I don't think they're going to take a quarterback. But again, we talked about the offensive line, how you have those top 3 guys, and then it just drops off. And I think if one of those top 3 are there, that they'll take them. And if not, then maybe they look to trade out. But I think they've got their eyes set on one of those 3.
And it feels like to me that the Panthers, just really quick, Josh, that all those players that Will mentioned, that there's going to be some combination, whether it be the offensive tackle group, the corners, the edge rushers, it doesn't feel like anyone has any of those prospects well ahead of anyone else. Like, if it's Evan Neal and Icky, you feel like those grades would have to be pretty close on the Panthers big board, where they would say, no, none of these players are like our number 1 player on our board where we have to pick him. So let's just move back a little bit and then see how the draft falls to us. If there was an extreme outlier, I mean, maybe if Aiden Hutchinson was there, which they don't need an edge, but someone like that they probably have never believed would fall to them at 6, I could see them staying put. But otherwise, any of that combination that Will outlined, it just kind of feels like, all right, yeah, they're all graded pretty similarly. So let's move back and then see what's there at 13 or at 10 or however far they move back in the first round.
All right. Burning question number 5. Will McClain points out Panthers do need an edge. Yeah, but like I don't disagree. They could use some edge help, but like the offensive line situation is so massive that I don't think they could ignore it. Burning question number 5. What player that no one is expecting ends up going in the top 10? Like, who's the surprise top 10 player for you, Josh? Nope, don't want it.
No, I know who you want me to say, and that is
No. I want you to say your answer.
No. You want me to say Jordan Davis. You want me to
I don't
say
care if it's Jordan Davis. I want to say Jordan
Does
Davis.
Will have bets on that?
Yes.
What's the odds of that?
He was
Brinson is quitting his job and moving to Hawaii if Jordan Davis goes top 10.
Yeah, Jordan Davis like 4-1 to go top 10. I mocked him going to the Falcons at 8. Now, like maybe I'm crazy, but we'll see. So who's your surprise top 10 player? And let's caveat with this: the over/under needs to be above. His over/under needs to be above 10. And if like Jermaine Johnson would have probably counted a week ago, but now he's 7.5. I can let you know what the OUs are there if you like, don't say Derek Stingley.
No, my surprise pick to make it into the top 10 is Georgia defensive tackle Jordan Davis. That is my pick. Even before I knew how you were trying to set me up, Jordan Davis was going to be my answer regardless because of his combination of size and speed. Whether you want to discuss the value of a nose tackle in the top 10, I totally get it. But he is unlike anything we have seen at the defensive tackle position before. And as much as we try to argue about what these teams should do, history tells us that they are drawn to traits, and Davis is a traitsy player. So I could see him going in the top 10.
How about you, Traps?
I think it's going to be Trevor Penning from Northern Iowa. I could see that being a Seattle Seahawks pick at 9. If they don't love Malik Willis, just feels like, and I wrote this week, just like researching what the Seahawks have done in the first round. Rashad Penny was a shocker. Jordan Brooks was a shocker. LJ Collier, no one saw that coming. It's really been since the early days of the Pete Carroll era.
Oh my God,
there's someone else.
Bruce Irvin was a shocker.
Bruce Irvin, yeah, he was like 15 overall. He was like 24 years old. Yeah, so it's like in the last 5 to 7 drafts when the Seahawks have actually had a first round pick, it's been like an out of nowhere, like holy crap type of selection. And what I found funny is that, or just interesting, is that Trevor Penning's combine is not being talked about. If you look it up, he tested through the roof at like 6'6" and 330 pounds. And he's got this nasty demeanor. He's a great run blocker. Kind of feels like a type of player that Pete Carroll and John Schneider would really like. I mean, they have bigger needs, I think, but they would kind of fit the mold of the out-of-the-box selection for the Seahawks in the first round. And I think Josh picked Jordan Davis to suck up to Will because he wants one of those Pick Six podcast sweatshirts, which I want too. So I'll say Jordan Davis too, if that will get a Pick Six podcast sent to my house.
I will say it will not. I actually got sent it for making fun of Brinson.
Yeah.
So
okay.
Yes. Oh, I can do that. I got plenty.
Sucking up gets you nothing on this podcast. That's for sure.
I will just say real quick, my guy's surprise top 10, which probably isn't even a surprise anymore, but his over-under still outside the top 10 is Jameson Williams.
That's a good one.
I think that he is the best receiver in the draft. If he had not torn his ACL, there would not be any controversy here. But he did tear his ACL. That frightens teams a little bit. That's going to cause him to drop. But I think it wouldn't be surprising. We have so many wide receiver needy teams in the top 10, whether it's the Falcons, whether it's the Jets, that will go in there, grab him. So I will not be surprised at all if he ends up in the top 10.
I mean, mine was Jordan Davis. my two would be Jordan Davis and J-Mo. I think I gave out on the pod a while ago, like J-Mo 6 overall, 50-1, and he's now 10-1, 6 overall. Like, I don't think you can take that. So with the 6 overall, what you're looking for is a trade out from Carolina. And that's what had happened, is the markets had mispriced 6th overall because they just assumed Carolina was going to stay there and take Kenny Pickett or Malik Willis or one of the tackles. And look, that might still happen. If there's not a good enough trade, Carolina could absolutely stand at 6 and take Evan Neal, Ickey, or even Charles Cross. I don't think that's crazy, but there's enough good offensive line players or offensive linemen, left tackle prospects, in this class that, as good as Neal and Icky are, and I think they're really good. And I know people love Cross. I would have him third on my list, but maybe you love Trevor Penning and you think you can get Trevor Penning at 13, or maybe you like Trevor Penning enough where getting those extra picks is worth going to 13 with, you're like, look, we don't want to give the Texans Evan Neal, but they're going to give us a second round pick and we need bodies. And we're just not there from a roster perspective. And so I think the one thing that I'd be like, I know this is stupid, especially after I blasted the Aiden Hutchinson Michigan connections, but like the Panthers are going to lose some fans if they pass on Icky at 6 and trade out of 6, just because half of Raleigh's gonna be like, are you kidding me? You've never drafted an NC State player in the history of your franchise. You had a chance to get this stud, like this guy who fell to 6. But I understand the idea that Carolina needs more picks and believes that it can get maybe a comparable player relative to what they could get back. So again, the market's just had mispriced Stingley, 6 overall, 50-1. Like if Stingley doesn't go top 5, it's very likely the Texans are calling the Panthers and trading up to 6 to try to get him. I think if JMO, I don't think JMO will go top 5. That would be a shock. But if JMO is there at 6, I think the Jets will be interested. I think the Chiefs will be interested. I don't think the Panthers would trade with the Falcons. I think the Falcons like the idea of getting JMO because, you're a team that's a year away, et cetera. But the point being is that I think the Panthers are more than likely, the Panthers are going to trade out. And I think the Panthers will create a market for the surprise player in the top 10, more than likely. Mm-hmm. And then the Falcons and the Seahawks are wild cards.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Here's the pushback. I don't think they're the only team that's looking to get out of the top 10. I think the Giants at number 7 could also be moving back. Seattle at number 9. I mean, they have historically traded back. So there's going to be options for teams to move up. It's a buyer's market. So it's going to be very difficult to figure out which of these teams is actually going to move, because I think there's going to be options in the top 10. I wouldn't trade back with Kansas City if I were the Panthers, just because at that point you risk missing out on all of those offensive linemen. And I don't think you can afford to do that. I think if you end up with a number 29 or number 30 overall pick in this year's class after having the number 6 overall pick, you're doing yourself a real disservice.
Yeah, more than likely. Going down to 29 and 30. But I mean, again, like we've said all along, the sweet spot here in this draft might be, 20 to 50, where you can get quality players. It's definitely risky. Don't get me wrong. And especially if like JMO's Tyreek Hill 2.0 and and Icky and Evan Neal are like all pros, or Pro Bowlers, year in and year out. It's a problem. Okay, let's get to some chat questions.
Ooh.
Unless you guys have any burning questions you want to ask.
One of those surprise players is the crazy part is it could be a quarterback, because remember all the talk was, hey, quarterback, somebody will go to the top 10. Now it will be a total surprise if it happens. I think that's gotten a little crazy.
You think I'm allowed to give out? Pete Prisco's not going to listen to the show, so I'm going to give out a rumor that Pete heard. That's just
boy,
this is like the craziest rumor. I mean, he said he heard Sam Howell and the Seahawks at like 9.
Just trade for Baker Mayfield at that point.
Just shoot it in my veins if you go Sam Howell at 9. I think more than likely, if you look at the Sam Howell thing. What's that? No.
Like, do you have Sam Howell?
Sam Howell
you would just like it because it would be crazy. Yeah.
Justin Palmer asked in the chat, will we ever see Brinson again if Hutch goes 1? No. Adios, amigos. To Mexico we go. Yeah, so I think the quarterback's one of the top 10 would be a surprise. If Seattle loves someone, I could maybe see them doing it, but they also have
40 and 41.
Yeah, and then Detroit's got 2 picks down there late. Atlanta's got 1 in the second round, so it's like you really don't want to burn that early pick on that quarterback if you think they're going to fall to the second round. And I think a lot will. I just don't think we're going to see a lot of quarterbacks go in this first round. All right,
or they could move back into the first at the end of it. Like they trade with a team later to get that 5th-year option, and it wouldn't cost them a ton.
Yeah. Although I think you could make the case, as I have, that the 5th-year option isn't actually any good, because look at where Baker Mayfield and Sam Darnold are, and look what the Giants had to do with Daniel Jones. If your quarterback's good, You just signed him after the 3rd year. You don't worry about that 5th-year option. Anywho, let's get to some of those questions in the comments. Toss them up. Nada if you get a chance. Ooh, I've been seeing this from Ethan Tyler. I've been seeing a lot of buzz of Stingley for the Hawks. Is it bad I want Willis? I think that sort of dovetails with what we just said, where it's not necessarily bad if you want Willis, but it's tough because like,
good.
What do you mean it's good? Oh, it's good.
I think it's
Willis.
good.
9?
Yes, it's good. I would do it at 9.
Wow. Josh?
I would do it at 9. I'm not like on my island with that one, but yes, I would pick him at 9.
I mean, if you have a conviction on a quarterback in this class, I think you absolutely take him. That's going to give you a lot more value than a cornerback. It's not to say that Derek Stingley doesn't carry his own risk if you draft him at number 9 overall. So I'm totally fine if that's the direction they decide to go. But I'm very worried about that offensive line. Malik Willis is going to have to be mobile to work in that offense.
If I want Willis and I'm the Seahawks, I trade back a few spots or try to trade back and then hope he's there. Because if you take him to the top 10, that just puts a ton of pressure on him that you don't know how good he is. You don't know how any of these quarterbacks are going to pan out in the NFL. You know how good any of them are. There's no Andrew Luck or Peyton Manning or Trevor Lawrence. And so taking him in the top 10, just because then you have to start him. You have to start him. You can't put him on the bench for a year, and it just opens up this Pandora's box of risk. So I'm not sure. I don't hate the idea of Willis to the Seahawks. I just hate the idea of Willis to the Seahawks at 9th overall.
I just hate the idea of drafting Malik Willis at 9 with the pressure that Breach talked about and the possibility that you could get Stingley at 9 and still somehow manage to get Willis. All right, like, would you rather have Malik Willis and whatever you get down in the 2nd round picks or Stingley and Sam Howell? Because I mean, I know Willis is a much better prospect, but like, I don't think there's any guarantee that he turns out better than Howell. I mean, like, I just don't think these quarterbacks have any sort of guarantee to him. Not like many quarterbacks do.
Yeah, my thought is just that if you like a quarterback, kind of like Josh is saying, you shouldn't really wait and hope he falls. I guess I'm a little scarred from the Bills in the 2013 draft class. They had the 8th overall pick. They traded back. Then they picked E.J. Manuel, and they got lauded for, hey, look, they got extra picks. They got E.J. Manuel, but they didn't like him enough to pick him at 8. They picked him at 16, and he ultimately obviously was not very good. That's just one story, but I feel like in general, teams that want quarterbacks usually trade up to get them. So picking him at 9 and then not having to worry about, oh, can we get back up to get the guy that we really like at the quarterback spot? I wouldn't mess around with that. If I like the quarterback, and I do like Malik Willis way more than any others in this class, I would just pick him at 9 if I was the Seahawks.
Yeah, you run the risk of passing.
You don't want to miss on him. Yeah.
Yeah. If you have a conviction, you need to take the quarterback, but man, try to trade back if you can, if you're the Seahawks. Next question from the chat. Mark Humes asks, am I mad for thinking that Ritter is a lock for the 1st round? It's still even money at some books here in the UK.
Wow.
His over under is like 28.5. There was a consistent drumbeat that there were multiple NFL teams, like a good number of NFL teams that had 1st round grades on Desmond Ritter. I don't think anybody can say that any one of these quarterbacks is a lock for the 1st round. Like, I would be taking the overs on these quarterbacks, even if you think Malik Willis is a great player, even if you think Kenny Pickett is a good player. I think it is more than likely that they drop just because of the makeup of the top half of the draft, because teams, I'm not saying we're saturated with quarterbacks, but there's just, there's only really a few teams who are truly desperate for quarterbacks. And it's, if you take one high and it doesn't pan out, you're in trouble. That being said, I had Desmond Ritter as the first quarterback drafted in my mock draft. So, who the hell knows what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I think on that real quick, that the thing that you would make you want to gamble that Ritter will go in the 1st round is that it does feel like, and not that Ritter's Lamar Jackson, but this is a Lamar Jackson situation where in that draft, it felt like the Ravens were thinking, well, if Lamar's still there at 32 at the back end of the 1st round, we're going to trade up and grab him because we don't know how his talent's going to translate the NFL, but we think we can make good use of it. Plus, we'll get the 5th-year option if he ends up panning out. And so I think teams would have the same kind of thinking with Desmond Ritter, where it's like, we don't know how it's going to translate, but if we can get a chance and we're in the 2nd round and we can trade up to 31 or 32 and get him at the back end of the first round, that would make sense. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if someone trades into 31 or 32 to grab one of these quarterbacks.
What would that 28.5 over under like imply? Is that saying that like Vegas thinks he's going to the Packers at 28, or what is why
No,
would it be
they
there?
think somebody's trading up into the bottom of the first
trading
round.
up.
Yeah.
Okay, that's just like
yeah.
to me it seems like Titans could be a team at 26 that could pick him, but it feels like they
All right,
probably
sorry, his
I
over
agree,
was actually
yeah.
moved up to 30.5. I see it now.
okay, 30.5. That makes more sense that one of those teams could trade back like Cincy
It was
or something. Okay.
These quarterbacks have been flying all over the place. Like
Yeah.
Willis was 12.5 at one point. Actually, you could probably get him at 6.5 for 5. You know, you could probably get him at 6.5 at one point. It's basically like will the Panthers draft him? He is now over 13.5 minus 155. I see. Kenny Pickett over 16.5 minus 160. I still think you could lay that with those two guys and feel fairly comfortable that at the very least we won't have two quarterbacks taken by 17. So like probably a push, worst case scenario, maybe lose a little bit of juice. Who else am I missing? Matt Corral over 33.5 minus 175. Wow. And is that it? Sam Howell? Howell's number has been crashing a little bit today. It's kind of weird. Okay. Never mind. Over 45.5 minus 145, I see. So yeah, I don't think any of these guys are a lock for the first round. I'd be taking the overs and the quarterbacks. I might take that under on Sam Howell just because of the chatter that we've heard today, but I mean,
What about my bold prediction of just one quarterback in the first round, Brinson? What do you think?
it's great. I think under 2.5 quarterbacks is a smash spot. I would highly recommend. Is it still trying to find it. Sorry. Over quarterbacks drafted under 2.5 minus 115. It was plus money previously. It was like plus 185, I think, like yesterday. So you would prefer that, but I don't think we're getting 3 in the first round. Just my take. Next question. Daniel Scott asks, what's the over-under on mispronounced names in the first round? I mean, are we
Let's
talking
think about
about
this.
on this podcast, or are we
I was
talking
going to
about?
say, is this Brinson or Goodell?
Yeah,
Will
Goodell
probably miss them up.
butchered Mariota one time. I mean, like, even I get Mariota right. Come on. It's tough though, because like
Kwanu.
Roger Goodell's
trying to
not
think.
seeing these like he's getting handed a card.
The card, it's phonetically designed on the card, so
Oh,
like,
it is?
it's
Okay.
almost impossible for him to butcher it unless
And yet,
they expect him unless they expect him to already know it. Like a huge quarterback, I think they probably thought, oh, there's no way he can mess this up.
There's no name that really stands out that I
he
think
could
would
screw up.
Bernard Ryman.
Bernard Ryman, George Karlaftis. He could screw up Kayvon Thibodeau.
Oh, I think.
Thibodeaux.
Are you sure Mariota's not Mariota?
He might have actually got it right. So like
I think it is Mariota.
in fact, it may have been that in his head he thought it was Mariota, and he's reading. He's like Mariota, and he's like, "What?" Because remember, everybody's like, "The Mariota, Mr. Mariota." No, right? Just me. Yeah, you guys are too young for that, I guess.
I got it. I laughed, but I just found
Nobody
a video.
laughed. It's fine. Let's move on.
Mariota is going to pronounce his name. Hold on, I think.
Isn't there one more guy that could be just butchered?
Arnold Ebiketie from Penn State, maybe Boye Mafe. If you just, I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a shorter name, but there's not any standout this year. It'll be on Friday and obviously Saturday a ton.
Lewis Seen. Maybe he goes with Sign.
Ooh,
that's a
sign.
good
There
one.
you go. That's a good one. That's the one you should probably bet on if you could bet on that.
Second, somebody just sent me a tweet.
It is Mariota.
Okay.
And the commissioner definitely did get it wrong because he added like an O. He said Mariota.
Shout out good friend of the podcast, Josh Norris, just fired me a tweet from JP Shadrick, who works for the Jaguars. GM Trip Balke earlier with me in the draft room said they had final meeting with ownership last night, ensuring process is collaborative and open. We know what's going to happen at 1, then follow the board and trust the board.
But what if everybody has a different board?
I don't think
What
Trip
does that
Balke
mean?
would say that unless
Trust the board?
I don't know.
He only says that if they agreed to take his pick.
I think so.
Yeah, exactly.
Because if it was Khan's pick or if it was Peterson's pick, he'd be like, this stupid board, you can't trust it worth crap.
You don't say trust the board if it's not Walker, right?
It's not your board.
That's insinuating that like he was the head of the board and he made it, and let's trust his.
He's going to add like some
evaluation.
last minute guardrails, like, oh, he's got to be under this age, he's got to have this arm length, something like that.
He slipped some stuff out there on old Icky. He's like, I don't know. Did you hear this guy like killed 12 people in high school? Like, he's like, Hutchinson. I mean, he could barely lift a cup. His arms are so short. He's like, dude,
I'm rooting for Balky to like make some subtle jab at Jim Harbaugh, like something about why they didn't pick Hutchinson. If he got down to that, that would be hilarious.
Okay, let's get a couple more questions and then we'll get out of here because we want to keep this. All right. Pokey Rad asks, are y'all going to talk about the Giants are going to wrench and everything and not picking up Daniel Jones' 5th-year option? Woo. It did come out right before the draft. That doesn't feel like a coincidence because they have till Monday to deal with it. They could have waited until Monday to make that call. There were people who were like saying draft Malik Willis 5th overall. Weirder things have happened.
They're not taking a quarterback. Sure? This is basically we're doing a 1-year test run with Daniel Jones. If he's awesome, he's going to make bank. And so he's being forced to bet on himself. It would be shocking if this led the Giants to spend a top 10 pick on a quarterback.
So one of the things that I always think needs to be mentioned in these spots is that Joe Shane and Brian Daboll have been given a free pass for 1 year. You play Daniel Jones this year. If you make Daniel Jones look good, you can even kick the can down the road another year and tag him. You know, and like the tag's not that, it's negligible relative to the 5th-year option versus like being locked into a bad player on a 5th-year deal. You can sign him to a short-term contract if he's willing to do that, or you can just draft somebody if you like the draft class. And if he stinks, you say, look, man, we gave him an offensive lineman and a wide receiver, or maybe you get 2 defensive players, whatever.
No, if he stinks, you say we didn't draft him. We got to find a new quarterback.
That's my point. Yeah. You can say you go to the ownership and you say, look, we tried, man. It ain't there. We'd like to reboot and try something else. And you could, maybe Trubisky is done in Pittsburgh. You bring Trubisky in, and then point being is that like you don't screw up the free year by drafting a quarterback at 5th. Who, if Daniel Jones doesn't play well, fans are going to be screaming to play Malik Willis. And then all of a sudden you start your clock earlier than you need to in terms of the hot seat for your quarterback and your coach and your GM. So they could definitely do it, but I would be surprised. Although, as I note, the timing of that, very interesting that they would allow that to leak out Thursday instead of Monday. Maybe that's on purpose because to try and, smoke screen some people. All right. Next question. All right, Breach. I'll leave this to the draft nicks and the Bengals fan here. John Olson asks, what's the Bengals' biggest need? Cornerback, offensive line, or defensive line? And what are the chances they trade back, Breach?
They could trade back. They don't do that a ton. So I do think they'll end up sticking there, but it wouldn't be totally shocking to see them trade back. I think those are their 3 biggest needs right there. If I had to rank them in order, it'd probably be defensive line, cornerback, and then offensive line. But the problem is that there aren't enough first-round talents on the defensive line. There's like maybe 3 guys. We've talked about Jordan Davis, Devontae Wyatt. You have all these guys that are probably going to be top 20 picks. And if you're down to the 5th best defensive lineman by the time the Bengals are picking at 31, you don't want to reach and take that guy. So I think they're going to end up taking a cornerback just because that class, you have 6 or 7 guys that go in the first round, and they'd rather take the 6th best corner versus the 6th best defensive lineman because there's going to be such a distinct difference. So I think they'll end up taking a corner, but yeah, those are basically their 3 biggest needs: D-line, corner, and offensive line.
Breach, let me ask you this. If Iowa center Tyler Linderbaum is available at number 31 overall and you have a comparable talent at cornerback and defensive tackle available, which direction do you go?
That will absolutely throw the wrench into it. But I think that if there's comparable talent at corner or defensive line, that the Bengals pass on Lindenbaum.
Wow. Yeah, didn't we have Todd McShay earlier this week? Well, actually, I think it was just like a speculation article, but it was written up like a report that Linderbaum and Karlaftis would not go in the first round because that's what I've thought. Like I've mocked Linderbaum to the Bengals at 31 a lot because it feels like they would go in that direction. But now if John Breach is saying it, then I
mean, you look at
wrong
the Bengals
selection.
You look at their Super Bowl run. I mean, it wasn't Joe Burrow that carried them there. It was the defense. I mean, you look at holding the Titans to under 20 points, holding the Raiders under 20 points, basically shutting out the Chiefs in the second half of the AFC Championship game, holding the Rams to 10 points in the second half of the Super Bowl. I mean, the defense played lights out, and with Larry Ogunjobi leaving in free agency, now you basically have an empty spot here. You don't even have anyone on the roster that can take his spot. So you got to get someone in there. It's just like, yes, they need offensive linemen, but I think that is the least of their needs because of what they did in free agency.
Yeah.
Fair enough. One, I thought it was interesting that Peter Schrager mocked Trey McBride to the Bengals.
Yeah.
You can bet over half a tight end, which sounds extremely bizarre. You can bet yes. We would like half a Trey McBride and half a Trey Linderbaum. Unfortunately, that's a push. In other words, if there's one tight end taken in the first round, it's 4.5 to 1 for one tight end taken. Like,
see, a curveball like that, I don't think is crazy. If you're talking, there's no defensive lineman. If your option is take the top tight end on the board or take the sixth best corner, sixth best defensive lineman, or sixth best offensive lineman, maybe they get a little crazy. So I think if there's one curveball, that one's not completely crazy.
And the one thing on Breach comparing the cornerback class in terms of depth to the defensive line class, if you pick the sixth best corner, it feels like consensus-wise, just my rankings, Josh's rankings, that you're still probably getting a widely regarded first-round pick at corner, like a first-round talent. Interior defensive line is Jordan Davis, Devontae Wyatt, Logan Hall. After that, the fourth or even fifth interior defensive lineman, you look around the internet, you don't even have to pay attention to me on this. They're second and third rounders. So if the Bengals ultimately didn't like who was available and those top three defensive tackles are gone, then I totally agree with Breach that getting even the fourth or fifth best defensive tackle, you're not picking a first-round talent.
Yeah, it's a huge reach. And fun fact about Trey McBride, he would be the first NFL player raised by same-sex parents.
Awesome.
That's a fun fact. Just very quickly. So like there's been, there were some people who cover the New York Jets who said there's no way they will take a cornerback at 4. Daniel Jeremiah, who is very good friends with Joe Douglas, mocked Sauce Gardner to the Jets at 4. Ooh. These same people or same person, it's actually the same people. Because Rich Cimini was kind of leaning that way. It was sort of talking up Sauce as a possibility over the last few days. Connor Hughes for The Athletic said it was no chance it was happening. Like 0 chance a few days ago, which is, just sort of dangerous territory to wade into.
Yeah.
like you don't know. Maybe. And echoing what Rich Cimini said, who was on this yesterday, said there's a lot of chatter about Sauce Gardner and the Jets, which is very different from 1 to 2 weeks ago. Received 3 calls from sources outside One Jets Drive today saying that's what they've heard. We'll see. There is nothing in the world worse than laying your neck on the line with a not a prediction, but like a report, especially when it's like related to this. And then all of a sudden you see like conflicting info come out, or you hear conflicting info. Like the knot in your stomach is so tight for like 3 days. And like, for instance, when like yesterday it was like Jags owner might just take Aiden Hutchinson. I was like, that's fine. Everything's fine. It's fine. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. I wouldn't go read if you want to laugh, go read the comments.
And real quick, to backtrack to the Lions pick that we were talking about, I dropped this in Slack that the Bengals official website did a media mock draft, and someone from DetroitLions.com, Mike O'Hara, was in charge of that pick. So not like someone who covers the team from an outside source, someone who actually works for the Lions handled their mock, and he picked Kayvon Thibodeau at number 2 overall. So that is interesting.
The number 4 overall, I don't have it on here. Let me see if I can just find it really quick, and then we'll get out of here. Sorry, I know we ran longer than we meant to, but I think this has been a good. I feel like we've been
Harper, of course.
I feel like we've been blitzing. Oh, you know what? Do you guys want to? I tell you what. Do you guys want to do a really quick blitz through on some over unders? Like all you do is Breach goes first, Josh goes second, Traps goes third. All you do is say over or under.
Sure, let's do it.
Ready?
I'm in.
I'm going to skip. All right. Lewis Scene? Lewis
Scene.
Sign? Lewis Scene over under 30.5.
My first.
Yes. You,
Under.
Josh, Traps, and actually, I'll tell you what. Just do Traps, Josh, Breach. That way, Breach has time to think because I think you guys are probably more. Well, you just more dialed into the prospects. Lewis Scene, Traps, go. 30.5.
Under.
Garrett Wilson, 9.5.
Over.
I'm going over.
Drake London, 10.5.
Under.
Over.
Kyler Gordon, Washington cornerback, over under 32.5.
Over.
Under.
George Karlaftis, over under 22.5.
Over.
The over is a good answer. It's heavily juiced. Sorry, I'm trying to find the Trent McDuffie, over under 16.5.
Over.
We'll see the third best corner.
To
that
some
fourth?
have them second, some have them.
I'll go under. Was that 16.5? I'm going under.
Sauce Gardner under 5.5, over under 5.5. It's juiced 150 to the under.
I'm going to say over.
Okay,
I think Stingley goes in front of him.
they can both go top 5.
Yeah, true.
Okay, it's a tough number. Zion Johnson, over under 24.5.
It's the Cowboys.
That's
Let's
right
say,
behind the Cowboys.
yeah. Let's
And
say under.
Yeah, it's juicy the under.
I'll go over.
Okay. Treylon Burks, over under 23.5.
Over.
Under.
I'll go under.
Charles Bross. I'm just kidding. It's Charles Cross. It's just funny on the website. It's misspelled. Devontae Wyatt, over under 29.5. Georgia interior defensive lineman.
Over.
Under.
These are tough ones. Jahan
I'm saying
Dotson,
under. The Bengals take him. He's not going to be there because the Bengals won't get who they want.
Jahan Dotson, over under 30.5.
Ooh. Under.
Okay, that's minus 140 for the under. That's a pretty good bet. Then.
Wait, I got one, Brinson.
Okay.
Matt Ariza, over under 134.5.
Oh, let's move down.
It was 124.5 at Caesars this morning when I wrote the newsletter.
Isn't that like the middle of the fourth round?
And I
Middle
said
of the fourth.
I said I would pound the over, and it has dropped 10 spots. I moved the line.
You did move the line. Good job. I'm going to say under. I think he's going to go early fourth.
I think so too.
I'll say over.
Okay. Daxton Hill, over under 28.5.
Under.
And finally, Kenyon Green, over under 27.5.
Over. That might be biased though, because I don't really like him.
Under.
That sounds biased. I'll go under too.
All right. Good stuff. That's the latest buzz and chatter around the NFL as it relates to the NFL draft. It's Thursday at 2 p.m. 2 p.m. Eastern when we finish this. The draft starts in 6 hours. Hopefully you can check out the podcast or rewatch on YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube, smash that like button. Make sure and hit alert so you'll get notified when we go live after the draft. And man, like I don't think there are any bad answers here, and it's going to be an insane night. Good stuff, guys. For Breach, for Edwards, for Traps, I'm Brinson. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We will talk to you guys after the draft.